Hello and welcome to the Airbyte sixth community call. I'm Ubby. I run community and DevRel at Airbyte, and here with me today, I have Marcos as usual to give us our user success and user support updates. And as our special guest for today, we have Tim Shea. Is it pronounced Shea?
Shea, that's right.
Shea. Okay. And he's the CEO at Latticework Insights. Now we'll get more to that in a sec, but what we're going to do is we're going to give a few updates on Airbyte from our end, and then kind of jump into the meat of this community call. First thing is that I wanted to talk about is that we've recently announced the Connector Marketplace. The Connector Marketplace, along with our discourse forum, is a place where you can go and commission connectors to be built. Additionally, if you're an expert at building connectors, you've done this before, you can go and offer your services to build connectors. We're Airbyte ourselves aren't really as going to be as involved in that, but if you want to contribute the connectors that you build through this process back to open source, we'll give you $500 in Airbyte cloud credits that will be soon useful in our upcoming launch of Airbyte Cloud, which is going to be really soon. I'll look out for that in the next month. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass this over to Marcos to talk about user success really quick, and then we will jump into our main presentation.
Okay, thanks, Avi. I really want to thank all the community members that are active on Slack and GitHub, helping to build an amazing product and giving us feedback and helping with code. If you have any feature that you want to see how to use with Airbyte, please send a message to me so I can build a demo hour showing how to use it. Also, if you want to contribute with the open source project and you don't know how to do that, you can send me a message so we can discuss and can help you doing that. And as usual, be active on Slack. And thank you all for being active. Team,
yep.
if you
Go for it. Is that do you have any updates as far as user success, or can we move forward?
Sorry, I clicked on
No worries.
the wrong Docker. So right now we are trying to improve our process of the user success. So bring more visibility to the community, how to create pull requests on the project, how the process is going, and improving this response. So improving our project to be more welcome to new members. And I think what we are trying to achieve is improving the connectors. So if you have any issue and you see something awkward, please share on Slack so we can keep improving that, or go into the GitHub and request an issue so we can work on that. And I think that's it for the user success.
Cool. Thanks, Marcos. Yeah, recently we've moved all of our FAQ into our discourse. So if you have any questions, we're trying to make a more interactive FAQ and forum type situation going on there. So please go ahead and check out discuss.airbyte.io, and that's where we have all of that, including the connector marketplace. With that, we're going to have some information about an upcoming connector building contest. So keep an eye out for the next week for information on a connector building contest. So start preparing your ideas for all the connectors that you want built. So because we're gonna basically have some cool prizes around who builds the most connectors in basically we're looking at the contest to span about a month or two. So get your ideas ready. Now that we've gone over that, we can get into the main presentation. So Tim Shea is founder and CEO of Latticework Insights. What is Latticework Insights? Latticework Insights is essentially a data integration experts. They've helped lots of companies such as the UFC, NBA, Puma, lots of different retail brands, Reddit, Fellow, which is one of my favorite coffee brands, which is really interesting. So they've worked with a lot of big names in data integration and kind of centralizing marketing and sales data. So they've been experts on this in a while. They've gone through a few solutions, and they've I guess landed on Airbyte for help in data integration, and they have a lot of expertise in this space. So I'm gonna let Tim Shea take it over from here. Thank you so much for coming on, and I look forward to the presentation.
Absolutely. I mean, Marco, really appreciate you guys having me on. Audio is good. Everything working okay?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Go ahead and start presenting.
Yeah, so I think that was an excellent setup. Again, my name is Tim. This is my company, Latticework Insights. We've been around for about 3 years. We've been calling it a data science and marketing agency, but really data integration has become the core of that. It really is the missing link for a lot of the data science people are trying to do, and then the marketing people are trying to do to bridge that gap. We found that integration is really the sort of key to that. So I'm really excited to be presenting to everyone today. We're going to walk through a case study, kind of like how we got here in the first place, and then a real life example of where we used Airbyte to solve a huge problem. So let me share my screen. Let's see here. Share screen. Share screen. Share screen. All right, excellent. I'm still good on visual here. Everyone can see my slides.
Yep, you're good.
Cool. Excellent. Sweet. So let's see. So state of the world, right? I think it's kind of important to level set like where we all think we are today, and specifically in like direct to consumer analytics. I think it's fair to characterize the current era as a renaissance in a way. If all the folks on this phone call right now wanted to start a new DTC brand, it's pretty easy. In fact, it's in many ways has never been easier. Why is that the case? There's been this proliferation of simple and specialized and cheap, right, and really inexpensive data platforms to get your brand off the ground. You can market on Facebook and Google, Trade Desk. You can sell on Shopify and Amazon. You can communicate with users through Intercom, MailChimp, Salesforce. You get QuickBooks and NetSuite. There's all these great tools to acquire customers cheap and grow fast. It's like the perfect mix for getting a brand off the ground. But the problem is there's this sort of looming existential problem as the amount of platforms sort of explode and proliferate, right? Each of these data platforms is a silo. And as a silo, all of your data becomes trapped inside of that silo. This diagram shows over 10,000 marketing technology logos on screen. You can't even see any of the logos. They're so tiny. There's even a little timeline here that shows how it started as a couple hundred, couple thousand. All of a sudden, there's 10,000 different choices the companies need to make when they're thinking about, well, where do I market, sell, manage operations, finances, and engagement for my startup? What we found over the last 3 years is the average company has their data stored in between 10 and 30 of these different platforms. 30 logins, 30 API keys, 30 spreadsheets becomes a huge nightmare. Answers to really easy questions actually become system integration problems, which is not what brands have become good at, right? They're good at building brands, not being good system integrators. And so we know that these really easy questions, some of which are like, can I see my sales and marketing data in the same dashboard? Shouldn't be difficult, but have become difficult. How many ads does it take to acquire a new customer? It's a really hard question, especially if you're advertising across multiple different platforms. Do our email campaigns prevent churn? Is it having an impact? And is it having an impact across different LTV segments? All of a sudden, we get a big data science problem that we're trying to figure out, as opposed to something really quick and easy for the marketing and sales folks to take and run with. To make that very specific, oftentimes DTC folks are laser focused on their LTV CAC ratio. How much money did I spend to acquire a customer versus on average, what is their lifetime value? How much do I make on them over time? And to calculate those two metrics, it's very simple to see how 1, 2, 3, 10 different data sources might now have to be ingested, centralized, joined, cleaned up, and reported on before anyone has any real concept for what LTV CAC is for the company. And I always feel like this is a good laughing point for the whole situation, right? There's a lot of ETL and BI platforms. They fail to address the root problem. And that root problem is that there's always sort of one more thing. There's always one more data source that you have to reckon with. This comic addresses, look, how crazy is it that there's 14 competing standards for doing this one thing? And these two smart people get together and they say, you know what, we need to develop a universal standard that covers everyone's use cases. And lo and behold, now we've got 15 competing standards. And so a lot of these ETL and BI providers fail to account for the one more problem. Many of them are discipline specific. They focus on a cluster of sources: marketing, growth, finance, and operations, each of which are now locking an organization into their own analytical stacks. And I think the biggest problem that probably everyone on this call would resonate with is, building a single custom ETL script is way more complicated than it should be. It's easy to forget all of the edge cases when we're connecting to an API. Someone says, can you just get all of the data from this API? Seems simple, but when you get into the weeds, it's extremely complex. So to bring this to life, we've run into this constantly. We run into this problem all the time. And so we worked with a direct-to-consumer holding company whose name I shall not disclose at this point. They were seeking a blueprint, right? They're bringing on lots of different direct-to-consumer brands. They wanted a blueprint to roll out a standard growth analytics platform for all of them. They had some of these great models for growing companies, but they knew that they had to come up with something standard to bring in all the data, do reporting very quickly. And we looked across the sort of spectrum, looked across the ecosystem. We knew that there was a handful of ETL providers that covered one cluster of data sources. There was a different ETL provider that covered a different set of data platforms, but there was always one or two or three that fell through the cracks. In this case, the one that didn't seem to have a great solution was a data source called Chargebee. So this is a company focused on marketing on Facebook and Google, measuring on Google Analytics, selling on Magento, emailing on Klaviyo, and they were doing subscription billing on a platform called Chargebee. So we didn't really have a good solution for Chargebee. So we scratched our heads a lot about, what should we do to bring this data source in? Should we use one of the many ETL platforms that are out there? There's quite a few of them out there. Should we build something custom? Should we mix and match all these different ETL providers together? It's a really, really hard question. And we knew it was hard because we had run into it many times before. There's a couple different approaches that we've taken when building, extensions to ETL platforms, building additional middleware plugins on top of ETL platforms. This is one of them. I'll show a couple as we walk through them. This is a solution where oftentimes an ETL platform will connect you to something like a Lambda, or in this case, a Google function, where it'll call out to a function. The function will wake up. The function will make an API request to some source API, in this case, Chargebee. It'll get some custom view of the data, make some custom API call, and it'll send the data back, right? So I got data flow, requests going this way, data flowing back this way. It hands the resulting data back to the ETL platform, and the ETL platform will dump the data, gracefully back into a data warehouse: Snowflake, BigQuery, Redshift, MySQL, whatever it happens to be. This is one pattern that we've tried, but there's problems, which we'll get to the problems in a minute. Another pattern that we've tried is to have the function, instead of dumping data back to the ETL platform, it dumps the data to a storage bucket, a sort of interim place to sort of stage the data before the ETL platform picks it up. It's a little bit faster. There's less reliance on the uptime of the function itself. It gets the data out of the API quick and quickly drops it onto in a storage area that the ETL platform can just zip across to the warehouse. Two seemingly pretty good solutions for doing this sort of extensible, middleware. But both of these architectures actually have major drawbacks, right? This gets back to the, building ETL scripts is harder than it should be. It's harder than it seems that it's going to be. And here's a couple examples. In the example where an ETL platform calls out to a function, the function does the hard work of extracting the data from the API, and then it sends the data back to the ETL platform. What could go wrong? Well, one of the things that often went wrong is that many of these function technologies, Google, Amazon, and Microsoft, have built in hard coded timeouts. Each platform, the timeout time is slightly different, but there's a ceiling, there's a maximum timeout that you can apply to the function. If you've got a data operation that takes more than 9 minutes on Google, you're out of luck, or you have some additional engineering that you'll have to come up with. And so we saw this as a major problem when we have big historical jobs. And many of these small DTC brands oftentimes have years worth of data, where they've got hundreds of millions of records they need to harvest out of an API. Assuming that the API can deliver it, that's a lot of time that a function would need to be awake. This is a tough one, especially when it comes to things like APIs that are fundamentally slow, or custom business logic that needs to be baked into the function itself. Now, one might say, why not just have the function only live for 8 minutes, have it do a small amount of work, and then go back to sleep. It'll wake up a couple minutes later and pick up where it left off. It's actually a great suggestion. We've tinkered with this many, many times. There's another bottleneck when it comes to these functions as well. Again, Google, Amazon, Microsoft have hard limits as to how much data can be sent back in a response. So ETL makes an HTTP request to the function sends it back to the ETL platform. On Google, you've only got 4 megabytes of data that you can send back at one given time. It's a very small pinhole through which to push an entire database, basically, of historical data. So we've come up with many different workarounds for this, one of which is measuring the size, the disk size of an individual response. But this comes up with all sorts of problems, such as, what if my response is 4.1 megabytes? And I have to sort of I have to have this logic that chops off individual bits of records in order to jam it through the ETL platform. The complexity of the function starts to grow, and every now and then we'll hit an edge case where it seems to be working fine, and then one record comes through, and one record's in one whole megabyte. And so this was a problem we ran into over and over and over, and just didn't seem like there was a hard and fast solution for it. So we said, what, this flat file architecture, this is going to be way better for us. It takes away the problem of timeouts and response payloads. Why? Because when a scheduler wakes a function up, the function does whatever it needs to do within its sort of 9-minute time frame. And as soon as it's got the data, it starts streaming it to a storage bucket, gets the data off of its hands as fast as possible. Then the ETL platform wakes up a little bit later. It grabs those CSVs, moves them across the wire. Everything should be great. But oftentimes what we found is that there can be hiccups in the API. The API can sometimes deliver duplicates. Sometimes the APIs are delivering lots and lots of updates. The records that it's delivering back to the function have a long life cycle. So there's many events that happen to a specific object. So it's delivering updates, and the function now needs to be smart enough to distinguish between what's a duplicate, what's an update, and what's a delete. And sometimes the function just doesn't know. It doesn't know. It's not talking back to Snowflake to figure out, was this an insert or an upsert or a delete or what's going on here? And in fact, many of these ETL platforms fail to recognize these things as well. Because it's working with just flat files, the CSVs, they don't tend to have a concept of a primary key. So if I'm pulling a record right here from an order and I zip it across into Snowflake, that's my insert. But if something else happens to that order later, the ETL platform will grab it and it'll insert a duplicate into the warehouse. Now, all of a sudden, we've got a brand new cleanup job that we have to deal with once we're in the warehouse. Custom SQL views, DBT packages, confusing, sprawling schemas. It's a very, very difficult problem. And many customers, as you can imagine, don't understand all this complexity. It's very frustrating for them to hear this from development firms. They want a nice, clean, elegant solution to put this stuff together. So what do we do? So how do we get to where we are today? Well, we knew this solution had to be native, it had to be easy, it had to be scalable. What I mean by native is that it couldn't be some sort of external piece of middleware. It really should be part of the ETL platform in general. And so we stumbled onto Airbyte. And Airbite sort of took, felt like we were, thinking the same way about the same problem. And they knew that this was going to be a non-stop issue, that there's tens of thousands of potential data sources that are going to have to pull in data from. And then they knew that the open source world was the only long-term solution for this. So we dug quickly into the docs. We got quickly onto the Slack channel. We got quickly up to speed on the Airbite CDK, the sort of connector development kit. We thought this was awesome, that we could go tap into existing open source projects, Singer taps, for example. There's lots of them out there. We knew that we could dust a lot of those off and bring them into the the Airbite world. Or if something didn't previously exist, we could just build something custom, and that would be natively inside of Airbite, solved for our immediate case. And we knew it gave us some sustainability for the long tail. When we've discovered new sources, this is going to be a great solution for bringing unknown data sources through our pipes. And there was a whole bunch of excellent features that we really liked right out of the box. One of which was that it was fully customizable. So we deployed our solution as a Docker image inside of GCP. We recognize that there is a short and medium term solution for a fully cloud version of this, but we were actually excited to be able to have full control over the source code, deploy our own solutions, do custom provisioning, whatever we needed to do to make the clients happy. And so we deployed this really, really fast, really, really quick and easy to get up to speed. Another awesome feature that we really liked was oftentimes when you're connecting to an API and you say, hey, give me the customer object. Well, the customer object often has many related objects to it. And every time you discover a nested node in a JSON response, that's a brand new table, a brand new bit of code that you have to write custom and maintain. If there's any new nodes or if there's any new attributes, that's custom code, custom fixes that you have to apply to a live ETL script. Airbyte does this normalization for us. Right? It's creating custom tables for each node. And this is a bit hard to read here, but we can see that there's a subscription object that we were pulling out of the data. And then it also recognized that there was coupons attached to subscriptions, line items attached to subscriptions, any related object manifested in its own table. And we thought the best thing in general was that there's also an option to use what's called slowly changing dimensions. Slowly changing dimensions basically means that anytime a record comes across and it appears to be an update, as opposed to updating the actual record, it creates a new version of the record in a underscore SCD table. This keeps track of a whole list of different versions of individual records. You can go back in time and see, what an old version of a record was, and it's all right there, right in the tables for you. So we were stoked about the solution. We know that this is going to get us a lot of mileage. especially when we're trying to act quick and get customers up and running quickly with a sort of battle hardened, tried and true technology. So that's it. That's it for my presentation. I'd be curious from the group. Are there any questions, feedback, comments, anything that the folks on the call are struggling with, or any general questions about our experiences with Airbite?
So before before we jump into some questions, I guess I'd like to go through some of my own. One thing you were talking about slowly changing dimensions. What you're referring to is the incremental dedupe sync mode, right? And so like how did you set that up? Like what were some of like the intricacies in setting up, or did it just work when you deployed it?
It's a great question. I mean, in many ways, it's a softball question. I mean, we noticed that there was a pull down menu in different types of ingestion modes.
Yeah.
We found the incremental one. I think we read like half of a page of documentation, and we're like, oh, this is the one we want. If this is going to give us an audit trail of every version of the record that the system finds, this is great. This gives the client a feature for free. They didn't even ask for this. It also gives us a little bit of sanity. Sometimes folks they look at a table and they say, "Oh, is this the right record?" Because we may be seeing something different in the source system, and it gives them a sort of row by row by row historical view of every change that the record has gone through. It's a really excellent, elegant feature.
Cool. Yeah, that's a great answer. We got one question from Jagannath. He asks, can you talk about how you deployed Airbyte for production scale? So I think you talked about how you're on GCP, you deploy the Docker connector. Yeah, can you like go into like how you scale that Airbyte?
Yeah, absolutely. I think having the choice between a custom deployed application and a cloud version of an application as a developer is always a nice luxury to have. There are cases where you want the sort of the cloud version just to do its thing. But there's many cases where you want the full control over the application, the provisioning, sort of like the user access to it, as well as the resources allocated to it. As you can imagine, some of these instances might be pulling through lots and lots of data. And so things like allocating disk space and RAM and CPU and so forth are really, really powerful tools to have at your disposal. And so we tend to work within the GCP environment. There's lots of tools for scaling, and so we knew that this was going to be a great long-term solution for this. The default instance of Airbyte in this particular case that we showed handled the entire thing effortlessly. So there was actually no additional resources we had to grant to it. We're certainly monitoring that closely, but yeah, we look forward to when we're seeing multi-node, multi-resource type instances out there.
Yeah, can you sorry if you have to reiterate this, can you like describe like the instance sizes that you're using and like what and or is that or is that not something you can get into?
It's a good question. I don't know
Yeah.
that answer offhand, which ones we
Mhm.
chose. Our experience with Airbyte pretty much end to end was the default settings that we were using, all were the correct ones. So we've definitely written ETL scripts from scratch where we were very closely monitoring disk utilization and CPU and having sort of daily heart attacks about whether we were just going to go over our limits and everything was going to fall apart. But the Airbyte architecture was quite elegant, and yeah, it was quite good for the use case.
That's good to hear. All good things I see. But so Jagannath has one more question. Are you using Docker Compose or Kubernetes? Yeah,
Docker Compose.
yeah. Makes sense. Moving on. Uh, I sorry if I messed up your name. Mihbel asks, how is your approach different as a company with many clients and with many sources for each client? For example, do you have one central Airbyte container, or do you spin a different one for each client?
Definitely a separate one for each client. I think that's mostly a privacy consideration. we're not, at least for this particular one, we're not rolling out our own SaaS product. So having each of these things, provisioned, and it's specific, let's say within GCP, we're deploying them to the client's GCP instance. So there is some logging happening in there, certainly, and there's data moving across the wire, containing PII. So at least for most of the use cases that we see, there's not a desire for us to do like a multi-tenant Airbyte spin-up.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I guess with that, just to kind of be cognizant of everyone's time, we're going to wrap up here. If you have any more questions, I'm going to be starting a thread with the announcement in the in the in the Slack channel. I will actually let I do see one more question has come up, and I do really want to answer that because because I think it's gonna be really useful. But I want Tim to give like a quick spiel on what Latticework does before we answer this final question. And if you want to just give like a quick plug.
Sure. No, absolutely. Appreciate that. Again, the company is called Latticework Insights. We recognize the data integration stuff is like, it really is the existential question, whether you're a big brand, big traditional brand, or you're a small direct consumer company. They're struggling with the same thing. We're out there saying companies nowadays, they have to build a Latticework in order to get to the insight. It's a true statement. And so, we're really focused on building out the right set of data integration skills, the right analytical engineering skills, so that we can service both small, medium, and large brands and help them grow quickly.
All right, awesome. It's been really great to have you, Tim. We're going to wrap up with this one last question. Zach asks, I see a lot of focus in the industry in mid-level transportation via DBT or interim SQL. With BigQuery and other lakehouse solutions coming to maturity, where denormalization is the optimal resting state of data, do you see this pattern anywhere in your larger clients?
Yeah, absolutely. I do, definitely. It's funny when you see when it comes down to the actual projects, the guts of the projects don't really differ, whether they're a massive Fortune 500 company or they're a beginning DTC company. They're all wrestling with the same sorts of things. The question around DBT is a great one. I think you'll never get away. We were strong believers in like custom, so you'll never get away from additional transformations. Brands are very smart. They're constantly asking different questions of their data. There's constantly a need to create custom transformations. I think there's an emerging need to have some governance on all of those transformations. There's some great folks out there that are talking about metrics stores, right? So as these transformations begin to proliferate in an organization, there's a need to keep track of them and to make sure that the whole organization is using the same thing. And they say cost per acquisition or LTV, that everyone's using the same definition of LTV. But I do think that ELT pattern is kind of here to stay. Definitely a much better solution than the old school way of doing it. And so yeah, so I do think those types of technologies, DBT, metric stores, and so forth, are going to be a lot of the future of analytics engineering.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. So much for coming on, Tim. It's been really awesome having you here. I think you've given a lot of really cool insights. And if anyone has any more questions for Tim, I'm going to be basically plugging him in the announcement for the community call, which is on the Hash Announcements Slack channel. So thank you so much for everyone who joined us today, and we look forward to the next one. And we're going to have lots of exciting stuff for you next time. As with this one, hope to keep up the quality content. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. See you next time.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.